Kazakhstan today is like an intersection where the traffic lights have stopped working. On one side, there are ambitions to become an investment hub for Eurasia, to attract billions and to claim a key role in Central Asia. On the other, there are growing budget gaps, oil market instability, and pressure coming from all directions: China, Russia, and the West. At first glance, everything looks fine. Officials report over $20 billion in foreign investment, new agreements with Beijing, record-breaking trade volumes. But behind this facade, a very different picture. Budget revenues are shrinking, oil production is falling, the market is cautious, and the tenge hangs by a thread made of hopes and expectations. So what's really going on? Why is a country that was once ahead of the curve now talking about risks, reserves, and unpopular decisions again? Who's stirring the pot? And what is Kazakhstan preparing for in the months ahead? The real answers lie behind closed doors. The Kazakh government has officially declared its goal to attract $25 billion in investment. The number sounds impressive, but global economic turbulence is anything but pretty. The world stands on the brink of another crisis. Financial flows are tightening, rules are changing, and in the midst of this, Kazakhstan is trying to prove it's a safe harbor. But inside the country, there are warning signs. Investors pulling out of major projects, construction delays on large infrastructure sites, mounting pressure on businesses due to fiscal deficits. Oil remains the main source of revenue. But even here, questions arise. Prices are volatile, production is slowing down, and tax revenue has dropped by more than 2 trillion tenge. Now comes the biggest twist. Who will be the first major partner to walk away from investing in Kazakhstan? And how will China respond, the biggest investor and yet the quietest player? Oil. Kazakhstan doesn't just depend on it, the country breathes it. And when the global oil market catches a fever, it's the state budget that chokes first. In 2024, tax revenues dropped by over 2 trillion tenge. There were several reasons. First, a decline in oil production. Second, a surge in VAT refunds. Third, a sharp drop in imports. On paper, this sounds like a dry technical report. But in practice, it means just one thing. The government has less money, and that means hard choices. Pay teachers or subsidize gasoline, invest in regional development, or plug the growing holes in the pension system. All of this, while officials present glossy slideshows at investment forums and pose for photos with Chinese delegates. But how can you trust the fancy presentations when in some regions salaries are once again delayed, when local budgets are already being slashed behind the scenes? Officials reassure the public, oil prices are rising, so revenues will bounce back soon. But what if the rise is temporary? What if geopolitics distorts the market again? What if Kazakhstan finds itself, once more, caught between Western sanctions and Eastern pressure? Silence isn't always a sign of stability. Sometimes it's the pause before the storm. Now imagine this. If oil prices fall by even 20% next year, what happens to the pension fund, to public sector wages, to all those grand promises written into the 5-year plans? Kazakhstan, often called a bridge between East and West, but in 2025, that bridge is starting to crack under the weight of reality. On one side, geopolitics, major partnerships, trade summits, new deals with China and Turkey. On the other, a shrinking budget, falling oil output, a nervous currency market, and thousands of unseen risks that have been piling up for years. Officially, Kazakhstan signed nearly $22 billion worth of agreements last year. Trade with China surpassed $43 billion. The government says it's building strategic alliances, becoming a regional leader, stepping onto a new level. But behind that polished image, a much more alarming scene. Falling tax income, widening deficits, slower construction and development, investor confidence declining, and perhaps the most dangerous, a fragile balance between 3 centers of power: Russia, China, and the West. Kazakhstan is like a tightrope walker with no safety net, and every move one of those powers makes anywhere in the world could shake the rope. Let's break it down. The first factor, the investment climate. Kazakhstan has declared its ambition to become a new hub for international capital. The target, $25 billion in foreign investment over the next 2 years. Sounds impressive, but for an investor, a number means nothing if there's no trust behind it. And that's where the problem begins. Over the past year, distrust has been growing. Several foreign companies have suspended their involvement in large infrastructure projects. Local business owners whisper in private, no one knows what the rules will be tomorrow. One day, taxes are increasing. The next, currency restrictions are suddenly introduced. Then come loud anti-corruption campaigns that seem more like a reshuffling of power than actual reforms. And in the middle of all this, China continues to advance. Quietly, softly, but relentlessly. China signs deals. It invests in logistics. It gradually takes over control of railways, border terminals, key transportation hubs. No loud slogans, no drama, just methodical steps forward. Experts warn, China isn't just building infrastructure. It's building a system in which Kazakhstan becomes a channel. A route through which money flows, goods move, and interests are managed. And how do others respond? Western players grow increasingly nervous. Some embassies, off the record, are voicing concerns. Russia, it pretends not to notice. But more and more often, Moscow reminds Astana of allied obligations under the CSTO and integration processes. In other words, pressure is building from both sides. And in the center of it all, Astana, running out of time to decide which direction to take. Because you can't sit on 3 chairs forever. Investors sense it too. And the key question now becomes, will they choose profit or safety? Can Kazakhstan truly become a reliable platform? Or will it once again slip into the old pattern, wait it out and hope for the best? The very backbone of Kazakhstan's budget. And also the one thing that could drag that budget down fast. In 2024, tax revenue for the national budget dropped by more than 2 trillion tenge. Why? First, declining oil production. Second, a surge in VAT refunds. And third, a drop in imports which destabilized the internal logistics chain. At first glance, just numbers, but behind those numbers, a serious warning. Kazakhstan's top taxpayers are the oil and gas giants, Tengizchevroil, Kazmunaygas, Karachaganak Petroleum Operating, and North Caspian Operating Company, the operator of the Kashagan field. All of them are deeply integrated into global supply chains. Even a small dip in world oil prices immediately hits the national budget. Now imagine this. If the price per barrel falls back below $80, what happens to social payments, to pensions, to subsidies for gas and heating in the northern regions? The Ministry of National Economy says there's no reason to panic. But internal reports have already flagged the phrase, high sensitivity of the budget to price volatility. And now, the worst part. In 2024, Kazmunaygas cut back on investments in production expansion. The expansion of the Kashagan field? Delayed. Tengiz? A rise in accidents and technical malfunctions. Karachaganak? Disputes with foreign partners like ENI and Shell over profit redistribution. Everything that could go wrong is going wrong, and it's happening all at once. Meanwhile, government officials insist that the budget is balanced, that expenses are covered, that the national fund has enough reserves. But here's the truth. The national fund now holds less than $70 billion. At a time when the tenge is under pressure, inflation is rising, and external debt obligations are stacking up. Whispers are already circulating among financial insiders. If the deficit continues for a second straight year, the government may have no choice but to raise taxes, cut subsidies, and scale back ambitious public projects. Now imagine what that would mean for the private sector, for construction giants like BI Group, for agriculture leaders like Olja Agro and Agrofirma Rodina, who are already struggling to secure funding, for banks who'll have to hedge their risks and tighten credit access. The first alarm bell has already rung. In 2025, the National Bank of Kazakhstan reduced its funding volume. Translation: money is about to get more expensive. More expensive for businesses, for consumers, for the entire economy. And now comes the big question. If oil fails Kazakhstan once again, what's Plan B? Does a real Plan B even exist? The tenge. On the surface, it looks stable. The exchange rate is hovering around 520 tenge to the dollar. It even appears to be strengthening, riding the wave of rising oil prices. But beneath this surface, tension is building, and most people don't see it yet. Investors are nervous. The National Bank claims everything is under control. but the market acts like something is about to snap. In early 2025, currency interventions reached record highs. Officially, to smooth volatility. Unofficially, to stem a wave of capital flight in January and February. And here's where things get strange. Some players started behaving unusually. According to leaks on Telegram channels, an international broker, registered in Dubai, began buying up tenge-denominated assets, then quickly converting profits back into dollars. This isn't just a game, it's a signal that big money no longer trusts long-term stability. And let's not forget, Kazakhstan has lived through this before. Currency crises in 2009, 2015 and 2020 are still fresh in people's minds. Each one brought panic, queues at exchange booths, price hikes on everything from appliances to salt. And what now? Halyk Bank, the country's largest, is ramping up its work with currency clients. Kaspi Bank remains silent, but quietly warns of heightened risks tied to global volatility. Yisan Bank, controlled by the state holding Baytarek, is tightening its monitoring of foreign exchange operations. That tells you one thing: the banking system senses turbulence. It knows the storm is coming. And the public? Reacting in its own way. Older generations are pulling savings out of tenge. Younger people are moving to crypto or trying to buy real estate. Anything but the local currency. Small business owners, especially importers, are blunt. We've stopped planning beyond 30 days. The rate could explode any moment. And now, the twist. Some analysts suggest the Kazakh currency market might be deliberately destabilized by external forces. They point to gray schemes between Chinese suppliers and offshore structures used to siphon off hundreds of millions of dollars outside regulatory oversight. The theory? If China tightens its grip and cuts off tenge settlements, the entire financial system could collapse. And in that case, neither the national bank, nor the commercial banks, nor the gold reserves would be enough to stop the free fall. And so we arrive at the final question. Is Kazakhstan ready for a currency attack? Or has it already begun? And we're only just seeing the first tremors.